Okay, fingers crossed this will work, and it should be.
I think it could work, yes.
Hi, my name is Carrie, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. And I am absolutely thrilled that Mr. David J. Skal has agreed to join us for a second Halloween episode. So thank you so much, Mr. Skal. I know you're really busy, and I'm just so grateful for you to join us again.
Well, as Boris Karloff said, October is my busy season, and it's true for those of us who are inextricably linked to the horror genre. Hey, I work in a cave all alone for most of the year. I'm usually out traveling at this time, and not this year. It's very different. But I'm finding Zoom providing wonderful opportunities to talk to my readers, and it's actually better than my publishers used to try to get me on those drive time radio shows in the morning. And the problem is they reach millions of people, but only very few were interested in this kind of subject. But with the podcasts and shows like yours, everybody's interested, and it's getting a lot of good feedback. I got a lot of good feedback on Lugosi, and since we did Lugosi, I'm here to do Karloff with you.
Excellent. You know, it's funny. I've had several people reach out to me and say how much they enjoyed it and that they've made the recipe that you taught me how to make. So that's
it works. I've shared the photos too with people. It's a winner. It's a very simple dish, and there's a reason it's so popular over so many cultures.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, one thing, the Forrest Ackerman is the person that I've seen credited with putting the Boris recipe on the internet for the guacamole. So, I don't know if that's true, but it would make sense. I've got all these cookbooks from the 20s all the way up to the 60s, and I've never seen his guac recipe in any of the cookbooks. So,
wasn't there a newspaper clipping?
It was a newspaper clipping, yeah, and I found it on the internet, and someone had told me that it was associated with Forrest Ackerman, which makes me happy.
He certainly knew Karloff late in life, but I was thinking about that too. I couldn't find anything in his biographies that talked about his food preferences, but he spent at the beginning of his film career, he spent about 3 decades out here in Hollywood, and was, of course, exposed to plenty of south of the border cooking. And in fact, LA's most famous Mexican cafe, the El Coyote Cafe, was founded in 1931, the year of Frankenstein. And then it later moved, and by the time Karloff came back, and he had sold his house in Coldwater Canyon and spent time in England, and then he and his wife pied-à-terre in New York at the Dakota, where Rosemary's Baby took place. The El Coyote had moved, and he would have been even closer to it. He was Chateau Marmont when he was staying in Hollywood. So I think, like all Angelenos, whether we're from here or we've got a soft spot for Mexican food. And guacamole is one of my favorites.
Oh, me too. It's funny because a few of my friends or fellow film history colleagues have made comments of, oh, I doubt a lot of them cook these things. And I always say, well, even if they didn't, they probably like to eat them. And also for me, it's just a really fun way to it's a new lens to kind of look through the star at, and it's a wonderful way to still make the food and talk to the experts. So
I think it's a great, I had a ball with the last one, and this one looks fun too. So let's get at it.
It does. Okay. So I already did a little bit of the preparation. When I first read the recipe, I was just struck by adding sherry to guacamole. Seemed really strange to me. I don't know if that's a British thing, or I'm not sure.
I couldn't find anywhere except this recipe that you have. Vincent Price had some guacamole recipes of his own. He threw in a dash of Worcestershire sauce and some mayonnaise as well, which is kind of different. But There are a lot of ways you can make this very, very simply, and then you can start adding various things to it. And I think experiments don't usually fail with this, as long as you're using Mexican ingredients and spices and vegetables. And and if you don't have enough avocados, you can always stretch it with cream cheese and then throw in some green salsa.
That's a great idea too.
So let's see what you're going to do with
That's
this.
great. Oh, by the way, when the pandemic is over, one of the goals for Hollywood Kitchen is, I kind of wanted it to feel like a dinner party. I'd love to get a bunch of horror film connoisseurs together around a big kitchen table and do the Karloff Vincent Price guacamole smackdown. Like I would make both.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd make both behind the scenes and then bring it out and not tell people which is which and label it A and B and then just see what people think. And I thought that'd be a lot of fun.
I like it. I'll be there.
Yay! All right, well, we're gonna take the avocado. I did get an avocado masher, so we're gonna do the monster mash, if you will.
Monster mash.
My parents used to play that song for me when I was little.
I was in the lab late one night.
Okay, so we're gonna mash up the avocados. We've got 1 medium-sized tomato. This is about 2 or 3 avocados, depending on the avocado size. We've got 1 medium-sized tomato. Onions don't tend to be my friend, so I go very light on onions when I make things. So I have a light amount of onion chopped, but people obviously can, change that amount at their leisure. I have some green chilies. Again, I think this is too something that people can add or detract according to their palate.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lemon juice. And as I mentioned, once I make all this, I'll set aside a batch to have with the sherry. And that's about a tablespoon of lemon juice.
Some recipes call for a mixture of lemon and lime juice.
Oh, that's a good idea too.
And lime often is featured in Mexican cooking, so it makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And cilantro is another ingredient that comes up all the time.
I should have thought of that. Oh, man.
Either as a garnish, chopped up very fine and mixed in.
Okay. All right, so that was very simple. And now we have Boris Karloff's guacamole.
Looks good.
All right, so now I'm going to set aside the sherry version of it. So let's see here. Put some in here. Okay, this is about a tablespoon of sherry, which I think is what the recipe called for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna mix that up. I'm very sad that Pier 1 is closing because my final purchase at Pier 1 last year was this amazing coffin chip and dip plate with the skull serving bowl, which is
Yeah, they were always fun to go for Christmas decorations and things. And ours here in Glendale's gone already.
So sorry to see that happen. Okay, so now we've got both guacamoles. So I guess now is the time I'll taste and see which one works, the sherry versus the non-sherry. Let's see.
How is it?
It's good. I really actually don't taste the sherry, which is odd. I thought I would. Let me try one more bite and see if it. I wonder if the onions and the chili somehow deneutralize the sherry.
It could match, certainly.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if that's the case.
A dash of sherry vinegar could also probably work in there.
I don't taste it. That is so strange. I totally thought it would make a huge difference. I'll take a taste of the main dish here.
looks like a classic.
It's such a great, it's so easy to make, and you cannot miss at a party if this is what you serve or bring. So we'll talk about all things Boris Karloff now.
Sure.
Get to the fun part. Like a lot of people, my first exposure to Boris was seeing Frankenstein and then The Mummy and then Bride of Frankenstein on television when I was a kid growing up. One thing that I was going to ask you, oh, I forgot the cayenne pepper. Oh my gosh, I just realized this. Okay, I add cayenne pepper now too. Okay. All right. One thing I was going to ask you is when you speak to modern audiences in like say 2020 or 2019, how do they react to the film? Because like when I was a little girl, it scared me to death. But I was also 6 or 7 years old a long time ago when, I don't know, I just felt like it was a simpler time when it was easier to scare someone. And I think kids today seem so jaded, and even adult audiences kind of do as well. So what's the reaction you tend to get?
Well, Karloff himself said that children from the very beginning weren't afraid of the monster and really identified with him. And it's fascinating. That happens a lot with monsters. At least the classic Universal ones. Kids tend to them as pals, not and guardian angels or something like that, imaginary friends. But not. I haven't met many kids that were frightened by them. Most of when I talk to students now, for the most part, they know the image of the monster with the makeup Karloff, initiated. But they probably have not seen the original film. That's almost always the case. Show Dracula and Frankenstein to film classes, or mostly lit classes that are where I teach the literary versions as they were adapted into film. So it's kind of a multidisciplinary approach I take with my courses, and they know the image. They've seen the picture. They've seen pictures of Charlie Chaplin, and they've probably never seen a Charlie Chaplin movie. So he's a visual image, and he's not as gory and scar covered as many of the the modern versions of the monster tend to be. None of them really work. They all take you back to Karloff, who's he got quite a figure in that film. I think James Whale had in mind the image of Conrad Veidt in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari as the sleepwalker. Is set all in black. He's got the pale face, the lank hair. There are scenes that seem right out of Frankenstein, especially the scene where he enters the woman's bedroom. Caligari is full of Hollywood just adapted and replayed, and but I think Monster was kind of a sacrificial character. I mean, in Bride of Frankenstein, he becomes a positively Christ-like figure, and Whale got away with that bit of blasphemy by assuring the censor he was trying to be pious and put Christian values into this horror movie. They bought it. Censors are they're very literal minded, and they just see what's in front of them or hear what you tell them. But the monster is a figure of great pathos, and that was not the case with the script that Bela Lugosi turned down. A lot of people think he made a mistake, Lugosi, by turning down the part of the monster. But the year previous, when he had looked at the script and done a screen test, the monster was not sympathetic at all. It was just a brutal killing machine. And I think that's one of the turned it down. He would have rather apparently played Dr. Frankenstein, but since he had been Dracula, the studio wanted him to be the monster again, to be the new. That's how both Karloff and Lugosi began their careers. A lot of the ads would often say, introducing Bela Lugosi, the new Lon Chaney, and the same with Karloff. And neither of them were. They were their own their own talents. They did their own special things. But Karloff said he received fan mail from children, for the rest of his life. People were very moved, by his interpretation of the monster, and it really is. It's wonderful. It's also it's like a pantomime performance. It's a silent movie.
I agree.
Both Dracula and Frankenstein were done at the beginning of the talkies, and they both have one foot very firmly in the era. And despite Karloff doesn't speak, he makes noises. Lugosi has that voice, which we can't forget. But most of his scenes are you're aware he's a presence, the hovering presence. He is an image in your head as much as he is a voice. And Dracula was released as a silent film simultaneously for theaters that weren't wired for sound. And Frankenstein would have been technically very difficult to do that with, because I don't think another actor would, sit still for, 4 hours of putting the makeup on and another 3 hours taking it off every single day. And it wasn't a matter of new actors just putting on a costume. And so we're probably lucky that, because it probably would be a kind of a travesty of what Karloff did, because he did it so perfectly.
Read that, about James Whale seeing Karloff in a commissary and saying his face had interesting possibilities.
That's right, he did. He probably saw him in one of the films he were at Warner Brothers. These gangster
Code.
Yeah, he did Five-Star Final and The Criminal Code, and there are stills, portraits of him from The Criminal Code that look so much like the monster, and that's the genius of the makeup. It exaggerates and stylizes Karloff's natural features, and it gives most of his face complete mobility and expression. So it indeed was a difficult, tricky makeup to put on, but it complemented Karloff's talents as an actor. It didn't hide him under it. That was another reason Lugosi turned it down. They put a very different kind of makeup on him, apparently. Unfortunately, no photos remain, but he was offended by playing the monster, and he was a rather vain man, and very proud of his looks. He was a leading man on the Hungarian stage. He never let people forget that. And here he said, I was a star in my own country, and here they want me to be a scarecrow. And but because the script wasn't what we think of now as Frankenstein, with all of its nuance and relatability, he was right to turn it down. And by the time Whale did it, the script had gone through some more transformations. Some of them, helped along by Whale. Whale came into his own, though, with Karloff, Bride of Frankenstein, because with the first film, he came in kind of as a hired gun at in the middle of development, and shortly before filming began. But the story is that Karloff was in the Universal Commissary, and Whale approached him and complimented him on his features. Your face has very interesting possibilities. And Karloff apparently was a bit taken aback when they said they wanted him to play a monster, and it would require a lot of makeup, but he went along with it. It's very interesting. Universal didn't sign a contract with him until after he had done unpaid weeks of makeup experiments, and in fact, he wasn't. Karloff wasn't signed officially for the part until 6 days into filming. I don't know who they thought they were going to get. I think they were just trying to save money. But it's typical of the way actors were used. He wasn't a star; couldn't expect star treatment, at that point.
Let me adjust something really fast on Zoom really quickly here. Okay. Yeah, another point I wanted to mention too was that I've always read that the Jack Pierce, gets all the credit for the makeup, but I've always kind of read too that it was sort of a collaboration between Whale with the design, between Karloff adjusting the forehead, and that it wasn't 100% Jack Pierce's, vision.
I believe so too, especially because Whale himself was an artist. He was a set designer in England, and was very aware of current trends and styles in art. And that monster is stylized according to the period. He is kind of like that hard-angled Art Deco sculpture, one that's been kind of split apart and put back together, I guess. But there are art movements like Cubism and constructivism, and which was also very big in the theater. And Whale knew about this stuff, and I don't think Jack Pierce did. I remember in 1931, a portrait of Mussolini appeared in a Sunday supplement by an Italian artist, and it is the spitting image of the Frankenstein monster. It was done like a cubistic a rendition of Mussolini's face. And but this stuff was all around. You could see it in sculpture and Art Deco representations of human beings. And as genius Jack Pierce was, he was a self-taught genius, and he didn't come out of an art background or a theatrical background. And he did apprentice more or less with Lon Chaney Sr., and that's where he got, no doubt, much of his talents. So we'll never really know. There are stories that Whale actually did some sketches, and in the film Gods and Monsters, very fortunate to be a part of the company. I did the behind the scenes stuff for it. The director, Bill Condon, created that Whale sketch, of the monster, which he gives to Brendan Fraser as a gift, and it was a very moving moment. It's just too bad people didn't do career retrospective interviews in those days. Whale didn't. He certainly talked to friends and admirers. Todd Browning did not. He was a total recluse, and he became angry when people press him about his career. And yet, without those stories, we miss so much. And I'm happy that I started doing this right when there were still some people right at the very limits of human memory, who were very young at the time of those early talkies, teenagers sometimes, and did manage to get some of their stories. So much is lost. I'm glad today there really is abundant journalistic documentation of imaginative filmmaking, because, and not just the studio handouts and puffery. Um, magazines like Fangoria and Cinefantastique and Rue Morgue are all the treasure troves of first-person recollections. And when the studio does now the extras on the DVDs, not mine, because I wasn't dealing with a film that was currently in preparation, and there were no politics involved, and actually the directors were dead for the most part, and but you can only get so far on studio handouts, and until like 1970s or 80s, that's kind of what film history was made of. There wasn't much digging under the surface, and but then in the 70s, 80s, and film studies became a respected academic discipline, and that began to be remedied. And I just wish I had started, any of my books. If I started them a year earlier, 6 months earlier, they could have revealed all sorts of things that we can only speculate about now.
I often wish that too. I love silent film so much, and by the time I was old enough to, really study it, most of them, I got to meet Baby Peggy, but most of them had already passed away.
Yeah. No, I talked to a number of people. Carla Lemley, the niece of Universal, was a dear friend for over 20 years. And I met her after I came out. And I was the first person who approached her about her appearance in Dracula, because it just came up in a casting list I found, the motion picture me. And first I had to track her down to see if she was still around. And I found a cousin of hers, and he put me in touch with her, and I called her. And the minute she said hello and started talking, I recognized the voice of the girl in the coach at the beginning of Dracula. And I said, I said, I wanted to talk about a book about the movie Dracula. You apparently appeared. And she was puzzled. She said, Dracula? No, I don't remember Dracula. But I was in the Phantom of Lon Chaney. And the thing is, with Dracula, she was literally just kind of called onto the set at the last minute, and her famous line of written on the back Transylvanian travel brochure that she was reading from. She really was reading it. And she never met Todd Browning. She never met Lugosi or Karloff, although she, in her later years, she was always being given pictures of those actors to sign, as kind of the last living remnant of the Universal regime. And just a lovely woman, Lupita Tovar, who was in the Spanish language version of Dracula, was 19 or 20 years old when she made it, and she was just a goldmine of stuff. There were questions she couldn't answer, because by the time she was in her 80s, and she had become fluent in 5 languages. In 1930, when Dracula was being filmed, she didn't know any English at all, and so she remembered the personalities vividly, but couldn't recreate a lot of the nuances. And her husband, Paul Donner, who produced the film, was going to give an interview the previous year to American Cinematographer magazine, and I was really looking forward to hearing about this Spanish film. And a few weeks before the interview, he had a stroke that finally took his life. And Lupita just brought out all the scrapbooks and the photos, and there were no notes or captions on the back of anything. And she said, Daddy had a photographic memory. He never had to write down a name, and now I'm trying to, sort this out for myself. But just amazing people. I met David Manners, who was in both Dracula and The Mummy and The Black Cat. So he worked with both Lugosi and Karloff. He found Karloff a lot easier to take than Lugosi, who he thought was kind of a very self-absorbed, obsessive kind of man who stood in front of a full-length mirror on the set and threw his cape over his shoulder and just kept saying to the mirror, "I am Dracula." And he said, "I never got to know him well. I just thought he was being and this is David Manners' exact words, just being the very odd man that he was."
Why do you think that turning down the role of Frankenstein completely destroyed Bela's career? Because he really, you can kind of see it tapering off around that time, and he just spent so much time in B movies. He didn't have that versatility and ability to do a lot of different things.
He didn't get to show off his true talents as an actor in Hollywood because he made such an indelible image as Dracula. And perhaps if Dracula had involved a heavy makeup or a disguise, he would have gotten able to show his stuff with other kinds of roles. But after that film, and it was his face, it was his voice, and so film studios and audiences, anytime they'd see him, they would see Dracula, hear Dracula. He didn't manage his career terribly well. He was changing agents all the time. He wasn't great with money. He actually was about a year after Dracula. His son told me he liked to live large, and sometimes the consequences weren't that great. He apparently he was known. He became famous at the end of his career for his medically caused drug addiction. But for most of his adult life, he was very, very fond of alcohol. And I think that may have hampered him as well. But he was impractical. He was impractical with his management, and in a way that Karloff wasn't. Karloff was the business part of his career was handled very, very well.
Cool. And I think Hollywood was always building up these rivalries, which we talked about in the previous episode, but it seems like they really didn't hate each other. They weren't at each other's throats like the press, I think, sometimes like to play up.
No, there's not a single anecdote from anybody about them, crossing each other on the set or coming to any kind of conflict. They didn't know each other socially away from the studios, so they didn't have that much interaction. And I think that Karloff had a certain amount of sympathy for him. He always, if not pity, he frequently called him poor Bela, and thought that it was because of he never mastered English well enough to function. That is actually a good observation, because as Lugosi's son told me, his father never really learned to think in English, which is the key to complete fluency. So there was always a kind of translation going on, and he didn't take English until he was nearly 50 years old. So if you don't learn a foreign language, by the age of 10, it's not going to stick as well. You're not really going to be able to think in multiple tongues, and that, of course, can hamper your your ability. You certainly don't want to socialize if you are wobbly with the language. On stage, Lugosi just hated it when anybody would ad lib, because he, at least, 20s, learned his New York roles phonetically, one syllable at a time. And that was fine as long as everybody else was, was letter perfect with their dialogue. And that didn't always happen. And there were anecdotes, somebody veering off and the whole production being very wobbly for a few minutes until it could be set right. But Lugosi didn't, I don't think, anything personal against Karloff, but he realized it was Karloff's fame that displaced him, and that he was the greater celebrity. And I don't know if we talked about this in the last thing. I talked to the actress Elaine Stritch, who played Dracula with him in Summerstock in the late 40s on Long Island, out in East Hampton. And she said she had some wonderful anecdotes about him, but mostly it was like he liked to go out with the cast after the show, and after, as he was wont, knocking back several scotches, would become increasingly maudlin and emotional, and she remembered him putting his arm around her and looking right into her face, and, Elaine, if it wasn't for Boris Karloff, I would be the greatest horror star in Hollywood. So there were not personal resentments, but I think he felt that fate had perhaps dealt him an unpleasant card.
When we were talking earlier about the whole trying to build them both as the new Lon Chaney, I've watched several times in the past, and I watched it again recently, the Kevin Brownlow documentary about Universal Horror, and which of course you're in. And I love that story.
Yes, I was his historical consultant, and I did appear on camera, but that was a lot of fun because he got me into Universal's central files to dig and root around all I wanted. It was just an amazing opportunity because not too many people get to do that.
Kevin is amazing. I love that story Sarah Karloff told about meeting Lon on a set and Lon giving him a ride home and him asking for advice. And Lon said, do something no one else can do and do it better than anyone else could do it. And I love to think of the two of them in a car together, like talking shop. I think that is so interesting to me.
Yeah, that's similar to something Vincent Price said to a class of acting students that I was able to sit in years ago in San Francisco at the American Conservatory Theater, and he was there doing a one-man Oscar Wilde show, which somebody should have put on film. They didn't. It's really remarkable. But the students asked him, Mr. Price, are you resentful of being typecast as a horror star? And he said, heavens no. If you have the ability to, he didn't use the same language as Chaney, but if you can do something that can typecast you and that no one else does well, and they will keep coming back to you again and again, you are the luckiest actor in the world, because most professional actors, spend their lives collecting unemployment and searching for work. But being typecast is the luckiest thing that can happen to an actor. I think all of the horror stars expressed opinions like that. Karloff certainly did, I remember, and Lugosi didn't, as far as I don't think he talked to any acting students that I know of. But it's true. horror movies were, kind of sniffed at for a long time as being, not quite real or not quite acceptable. They were always the C pictures, the B pictures, of course. But now, if you look at the arc of motion pictures, the biggest blockbusters of all time have taken from those old horror and monster. I mean, there is a creature, there is a monster, there are special effects, there are all of the things we associate with those old fright films in the most successful movie ever made, many, many times. So it's gone from the periphery to kind of the center of what Hollywood does. Just look at until this year. I look at the roster of summer blockbusters and see how many monsters, creatures, and curious, grotesque, are still visiting us through the medium.
Yeah, I always tell people that, these films are the building blocks, film history, of what is being done in the present, what is being done in the future. Which brings us to your book. We talked about it last time. We'll talk about it again this time because it's excellent. And I think one thing that makes this book so great and accessible is how you lay out these 31 movies that are, to those of us that are connoisseurs, we've seen, but then you list movies that maybe we haven't seen. So it kind of plays to both the seasoned connoisseur and the beginner. So either way, you can recommend this book to someone, and there's going to be plenty of juicy, wonderful, delightful recommendations that they're going to want to see.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of my books have been aimed at very serious film fans and aficionados and academics, and but I've never taken an academic tone of voice with my I don't use the jargon. I like writing that's accessible, and I always try to recapture some of my initial excitement and enthusiasm for these movies when I first discovered them at the age of 10 or 12. And this book, Turner Classic Movies, approached me about it, and they had done a book about Christmas movies. It was very successful, and Halloween, of course, is the second biggest retail holiday in America, and so it made commercial sense to look at that. And it had never been done. There had never been like a countdown book, 31, films picked for the month of Halloween, and but there weren't enough movies about Halloween. Otherwise, the book would be just totally swamped by the John Carpenter films. And we, as fun as they are, there have been plenty of books like that. So we went instead for films appropriate for Halloween, and films especially appropriate for people who were new to the genre. And TCM had a pretty good idea of its demographics, and so we pitched that direction, and I had a lot of fun writing because I was able to use any anecdotes that I just didn't have room for in previous discussions of a lot of these films. When you're doing a survey study of an entire genre, you don't you can only spend a paragraph or so rather than several pages on an individual film. And lo and behold, I'm getting a lot of wonderful feedback from people who are saying, I don't know all that much about monster movies, but this is the perfect book for me, or the perfect book for my my spouse or my significant other who doesn't understand my interest in these things. And so there's plenty there. 31, not enough. So we have an alternate entry. If you enjoyed this, you may also enjoy this. So I tried to pick something that would make a nice double feature, for each entry. And I am very gratified how much uh, how well it's doing, especially in this pandemic time when uh, I guess people have a lot of time to stay at home and read books, and it's very nice to hear from my publishers and the publishing press that book sales took a big hit in the spring. It just kind of wiped out everything, like so many industries. But it has really bounced back, and people are buying books at the same rate that they did, a year ago, which is very encouraging to those of us who make our livings in the world of books.
And I always encourage people, if you buy the book, and I encourage you to, please, Dark Delicacies, Larry Edmonds, Froman's, Chevalier's, at the Last Bookstore in downtown LA.
Please, independent stores. I have a special arrangement with Dark Delicacies, which is in Burbank, California, and just down the road from me. And I drop in there once a week to sign books that people have ordered and requested personalized inscriptions. So they're the go-to source for signed copies this season. But if you get unsigned copies somewhere else, hopefully by next year I'm going to be roaming around the world again, and you can certainly bring it to me. I'll be happy to sign it.
You know what I would love to see? One of the big joys in my whole life is seeing movies on the big screen. Before the pandemic, I was at the UCLA Archive or the Egyptian all the time. I would love to see a retrospective of all of these films on a giant screen going on for like a whole month. Wouldn't that be amazing?
It would be, yeah, it would be terrific. I think, Turner Classic Movies tries to do something like it. Not all of the films in my book are on Turner this year, but they did have me on at the beginning of October. I was co-host with Dave Karger, and we introduced 4 films. I picked them, one from each decade, from the 30s through the 60s, and so they did line up very nicely with the book for one night. But many of the others have popped up, and they've done a very, very nice job this month with what you can see, and they got just gorgeous prints of these films. I don't think I've seen a better television print Dracula than the one they featured that night I was on.
Oh,
so definitely go have a look. And somebody is slurping.
Actually, you know what this is? I completely forgot that today is the day my landlord has the gardener and the weed whacker all over this whole area, and it's so loud outside, so I profusely
No, I was wondering. I thought you might have a pet.
No, I do have a black feral cat that follows me around Hollywood forever, and that's the closest thing I have at this moment to a pet.
Well, it sounds like a yeah. That's why people are always asking, can they come to my house to shoot an interview? And I said, well, to have you, but I can't control the leaf blowers and the construction that's always going on and the traffic sounds, and so please, take some soundproof hotels. But it does sound exactly like you have a large dog with a bowl of water just off screen.
I wish that were true. Right now, to me, it sounds a little like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because they just run up and down this area with the loudest weed.
Oh, that's I'm hearing a liquid sound, very definitely.
Huh.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what your viewers think is going.
I kind of just have to roll with these things, I guess, when they happen this way. But,
anyway. Thank you for having me on, having me and Fright Favorites on. I hope we can do this again, because we don't have to, push this book, although I appreciate a plug.
And I also always like to recommend your other
It's really a great idea for a show, and I hope you expand it and really just run with it. And you've got to do Vincent Price sometime soon, because he he's got several cookbooks, and he was truly into culinary discoveries and experiments.
I
And
have two of them, actually. A first edition of his 1965 Treasury of Great Recipes, which I think this year is the anniversary of. And I have Cooking Price-Wise. So I would love to do a Vincent Price episode.
no, I have. I've got the reissue that came out of his Treasury of Great Cooking, and his daughter Victoria did a very inscription to me, and it's sitting over there with all their. It's such a beautiful book. I don't like to kind of have it out on the counter and without some flashcard or. It needs plexiglass, not for the pandemic, but just for splash. And that's my phone that I'm not going to. There. Okay.
But I do like to plug your other books, though, because I know how hard it is to get books out there in the world and, get people to pay attention to stuff sometimes in a crazy.
Well, you know what's great is that this is targeted. This is really wonderfully targeted media in the way that, drive time radio programs aren't. My publishers used to, I think I said this before, used to knock themselves out trying to get me on those drive time shows. And yeah, you get audiences of hundreds of thousands and not too many who are interested in old movies, much less monster movies. And I'm a podcast addict myself, and I have too many political podcasts right now on my phone, and it's time to really dial that back. And hopefully, I can do that next next Tuesday. But there are just great. They're great people, and especially the fans, very knowledgeable people talking about film and the love and the appreciation. I mean, sometimes fanboys get sneered at, and I'm a fanboy. I'm never stopped being one, and I missed the people this year. I'll tell you that. I mean, I like using Zoom, but I do like to come out once a year and have a month where I can actually meet the people reading my books and talk to them in person, and you get a different kind of vibe from it, and cross our fingers about a vaccine and mitigation efforts. Maybe next year. I think 22 is probably a sure bet. I hope the end of 21 will be in a very different place.
Me too. Well, yes, I would love to do a Vincent Price episode with you. We should do that. I should go through the cookbook and figure out what would be a good recipe to make.
Okay, I will do that with you. If you can't find anybody, I will do Vincent as well. He is, because I actually did meet him a few times and had a correspondence and over one of my books, and got to see him perform live on stage. And
Oh my God.
I interviewed him for a school newspaper in way back in 1969. And I guess I never really talked about that. I will have to drag up. I'll drag up that story and tell you how I really was a nerdy fanboy at that point. But Vincent was he was very talented. All the strange people who approached him, and one of his favorites, he never put down a fan or turned down a request. And he told us one story about being on a plane. A woman came over to his seat and with an autograph, and he was smiling. And he said, "Oh, could you give me your autograph, Mr. Karloff?" And without missing a beat. He didn't stop smiling. He said, "Well, of course," and he signed it Boris Karloff. Best wishes. That's class. That's the way to deal with obnoxious people. I haven't had many obnoxious fans at all. I think there are occasionally I come across people who might want to get a little bit more of another kind of life, but the affection and love for these old movies and these stars is very, very real. And I think it's, we live in a world that's so, everything seems so precarious and nothing lasts. And for a lot of us, us baby boomers, those monsters from the early 50s and 60s, that culture is kind of a bedrock for us. And I didn't expect it was going to anchor my life the way it did, but here I am.
I know the feeling.
Are you going to be, is Hollywood Forever doing the Day of the Dead this year at all?
Well, they can't do it really an event like they did last year, because last year we had 50,000 people. And this year, I think they're doing it for property owners and families that have a loved one there exclusively, I think. And then they're going to do a virtual version.
Yeah, that's too bad, because for a long time, LA was missing a Day of the Dead proper kind of celebration. And this, I haven't gotten there in person, but I've been following it and seeing the photos and videos. Really want to do it. I almost had a chance to go to Oaxaca when I was doing my my Halloween history, and because of the way the schedule worked and the way the publisher was paying me, I couldn't work it into the calendar. But I would love to be part of that that thing. I think of it as a more genuine kind of Halloween, and it's fascinating the way that the holidays blend with each other. They're very similar, very.
Yes, our Day of the Dead, it really is amazing. And one thing I love is just there's so many creative people in Los Angeles, and the artistry and the detail and the work and the thought that is put in to many of those shrines is just magnificent. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, this is one of the creative capitals of the world. LA doesn't seem like, it seems kind of flat and spread out and boring and tacky, a lot of the time. And yet it is as vibrant a place for creative people in the arts as London or Paris or New York. And just the theater thing, and I'm kind of mourning the absence of theater these days. But there is as much theatrical talent here in LA as you'd find in New York or the West End, and I hope I can't do anything to lure you back, because there's nothing to recommend at this moment. But next year maybe we can.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being my guest again. And I know you're really busy this Halloween. You've got such a busy schedule. So I really appreciate your coming back into Hollywood Kitchen and giving all of us your time and expertise. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. This is the only time of year people notice I'm here. So I take advantage of it, and I really enjoy it. And yes, I'm cramming a lot in over the next few days, but it's all fun. I did Australia yesterday, which was a film festival they're showing Todd Browning films, and talked about that. And of course, Amazon Australia has Fright Favorites, so they were aware of that as well. And I wasn't expecting to get the kind of questions I did. But anyway, that's it for now. I still haven't rigged up the skeletons on the front porch the way I'd like them to be.
Priorities, we all have to do those.
They've got lights on them, and I have a projector, and I have some very specific effects in mind, and I just haven't had time to get around to it. So something I probably will do a little bit of this afternoon, and maybe I'll whip up some guacamole.
Excellent. Well, let me know how it turns out, and let me know if you have the same sherry effect that I had, where you can't even taste the sherry.
I'll do that. I'll try it. I know I've got some sherry vinegar in the kitchen, but I'll try some Vincent stuff with the Worcestershire sauce and mayonnaise and see what it does.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank
Carrie,
you so much.
yeah. Take care. Happy Halloween.
You too.